now we are going to check in with Law&Crime's Elizabeth Millner. She has been in the courthouse the entire time throughout the duration of this case. She's been to every hearing and she's been there for the trial every day. She has been in the courtroom. So Elizabeth, I'm really interested to hear from you about what's been going on this morning in the courtroom. Some really compelling testimony. I've been reading online that the jurors have been seeing some photographs from Cassie Ventura's electronic devices that show maybe some bruising and some other things like that from injuries she says she suffered at the hands of Sean Combs.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of a majority of what the focus was on today. We saw a lot of exhibits in front of the entire gallery, as well as the jurors too. A lot of text messages, a lot of photographs, either photographs from the red carpets after, physical abuse that Cassie was talking about during her testimony today. We saw text message exchanges between Cassie and Diddy, who, in some text messages he's referred to as the name of Pop, and Cassie is referred to as baby girl in these types of text messages. And so that was kind of a lot of focus of what this morning has been so far. Cassie is still under direct examination by the prosecution. She's being questioned by ASA Emily Johnson. Diddy today appearing in a different color today. He had a cream sweater on, a white undershirt. He had gray slacks on, whereas Cassie, she had a nice, a very gray long dress on. She came in with a black trench coat. Whenever she had walked over to the witness stand, it was kind of the same situation as it was yesterday. She didn't look over to the defense's side. She didn't eyeball Diddy from what I could see of her walking up to the witness stand. It seems like she was just laser focused on getting there, sitting down. The jury would be brought in afterwards. They would sit down. She would kind of, look at their direction, definitely not looking at the defense's direction. And from what I could see, even during her line of questioning, it seemed that she was just, again, laser focused on just answering the prosecution's questions. She kept her eyes on the prosecutor, again, that being Emily Johnson, while she was asking her questions. A notable thing that I also saw while sitting inside the courtroom today is that, Diddy's support looked a lot different today. Normally we're seeing his entire family members. We're seeing some of the mothers of his children come into that courtroom. And today was a little different. Today it was just Christian Combs, aka King Combs, Justin Combs, Quincy Brown, Janice Combs, Diddy's mother. But notably, none of his daughters were inside that courtroom today. They had been there Monday and Tuesday, but not sure if maybe it was the rain that didn't bring them in today, or maybe it was the fact that they knew, Cassie would be testifying for a couple more days, and just kind of the graphic nature of her testimony. They were just kind of like, let's not come today. But that is some big standouts that I definitely noticed while sitting in the gallery today.
This is some really graphic and difficult testimony. And Sean Combs' daughters, I mean, these are young women, teenagers in some instances. And I mean, this has got to be difficult for them to hear. A woman, these are graphic sexual details, physical abuse, drug use. I mean, these are really difficult things to listen to. And this is their father. And this is another woman. So this has to be difficult for them to hear. And I think I was reading the other day, Elizabeth, that they actually walked out at different points during some of the testimony.
Yeah, they walked out specifically during Daniel Phillips' testimony. He is one of the escorts that Cassie had spoken about as far as being involved in the freak-off, someone that they would use pretty often. And so during that time, especially when it came to, like you had said, Angenette, just some of those graphic details, sometimes I really kind of get lost in just all the notes that I had because at this point I'm already on notebook 2 from this trial, and we're only on day 3. So a lot of stuff kind of going on. But yeah, for the most part, it is a lot of hard details to kind of listen to. Look, I'm older than Diddy's daughters. I am older than Cassie was when she had met Diddy. And even for me, myself, it was very hard to kind of listen to that testimony. I recorded a sidebar yesterday, and there was just a moment that I had to take myself because, just to kind of hear from her perspective and kind of, the physical abuse that she says she endured during her relationship with Diddy. Because even as somebody, like myself, who was always on social media, always following pop culture, always kind of invested in, what is going on with celebrity lives. For a long period of time, it seemed like they were this quote unquote picture perfect couple. Every time you would see them, Cassie would appear very happy. Diddy was always on her arm. They were traveling all around the world. They were taking private jets. They were doing, just essentially living the high life. But then hearing this graphic testimony, hearing that, after a red carpet premiere that she would have to go and do a freak off, hearing that, on a birthday where she just wanted to hang out with her friends and do karaoke, things like that, because she was in her early 20s to late 20s when this relationship was going on. And it seems like she, from her perspective, just wanted to live like any normal 20-something where, she would spend time with her boyfriend. She would only be intimate with her boyfriend, but at her boyfriend's direction, which is something that she had talked about throughout the duration of her testimony, that she participated in these freak-offs because that made Diddy happy. That was something that he fantasized about. That was something that she essentially wanted to do to please him. And so, just hearing through all of that, it is very hard to kind of digest that and unpack it. And as much as people may say, like, I don't understand how Elizabeth can deal and listen to all of this, I don't understand how Cassie can testify to all of this because it is so graphic, and I can only imagine how she feels having to do this in in the general public, having to talk about doing freak-offs when she had UTIs or when she was on her menstrual cycle or that type of sort. It's very, very graphic details that she is laying out while the prosecution is questioning her.
I'm sure it's just got to be traumatic for her to relive this. I'm wondering, Elizabeth, from your vantage point in the courtroom, how is the jury, if you can get a good look at them? Because I know it's sometimes in these courtrooms, you're trying to look around, it's crowded, you can't always see, and sometimes jurors are very stoic. But are you able to see the jurors and see if they are reacting at all? Is there any facial expression that you can see from them as they're listening to Cassie and as they see that awful hotel video from 2016?
Well, the hotel video, the jurors had already seen even as early as Monday. And so that was something that they were very familiar with. As far as, reactions, there was no visible reactions from what I could see. I couldn't see anyone necessarily, wiping away tears. For the most part, I saw, some jurors were taking their notes down. Some jurors were, because whenever the exhibits are shown, they're displayed on a screen right in front of them, very much intently analyzing these messages, looking at them, looking at the contents of it. Because in addition to the messages that we saw, even the red carpet photos that we saw, we also saw photos of Cassie with a fat lip, as she had called it. It was bruised, it was swollen, as you could tell from the photograph. We saw her with a cut on her eyebrow that she had to go to a plastic surgeon at Diddy's direction so that way they could get it fixed. You see photos of her with bruises on herself. Some of the photos that we even have in house of Cassie and Diddy on red carpets and that sort. But as far as the jury's reaction to it, for the most part, they were again looking at either the exhibits, taking their notes down, or even just directly looking at Cassie herself. I feel like her testimony comes off very compelling, very credible. Even for the most part, if there's a question that, she doesn't necessarily have the answer to, she's very open about that. I don't remember. I don't recall. I don't remember exactly what he had said. She comes off very credible. And even Diddy himself sitting at the defense table, he's doing kind of like a tennis match look where he's looking, at ASA Emily Johnson, then he's looking at Cassie, he's looking at the jurors. And, as much as, I talk about Diddy very much being a part of his defense, he definitely is, because he is very laser focused on the testimony that is coming out. He is very laser focused on what Cassie is saying. And if there is something that she had said, he's writing some notes down, he's handing it off to his defense attorneys. And so, yeah, it seems like for the most part, a lot of people are just very much intently listening to just what she all has to say. And a lot of people, for the most part, are just being laser focused on Cassie and everything that she has been describing throughout the duration of their on and off relationship for an 11-year time period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something our viewers have been asking about today, Elizabeth. How long were they together? And 11 years. I mean, it's a long time. And she was a very young woman when she got together with him. So there's a lot to go over through her testimony. I want to get back to what you were saying about Sean Combs, and you're saying he's a really active participant in his own defense, and of course he would be. I mean, his life is on the line here. He could, if he's convicted, spend theoretically the rest of his life behind bars in a federal prison. I was reading the other day that he was kind of just sitting back and looking at her intently, at Cassie, as she testified. You're saying it's like a tennis match. He's kind of looking back and forth, passing notes, things like that. Are you seeing any emotion from him, or is it just more like, okay, we've got to get down to business, and he's just kind of intently focused on this? I mean, are you seeing anything from him at all?
It's looking kind of like a little bit of both. There are times where his head is down, especially as they're talking about things like the number of escorts that were brought in. Some of these other testimony that was brought in as far as just how often and frequent it is. For the most part, I've not seen too much of a reaction, even as far as, the physical assaults that are being talked about in this testimony. I'm seeing, for the most part, again, him just kind of either he's keeping his head down because he's jotting a note down, or maybe keeping his head down because his family is behind him, and in their respect, also kind of looking, at Cassie and Cassie's direction, looking at the exhibits that are displayed into the gallery. And so for the most part, it does seem like he's not having too much of a reaction. Not sure if that's just a defense strategy that they're having, so that way it doesn't come off, possibly prejudicial or anything like that. But for the most part, he just seems to be just kind of looking on, not having any type of reaction as far as feeling bad or anything like that. But again, I'm not in his head at all, actually, so I don't know fully what he's thinking in his mind. But for the most part, it seems that if there is a point that he wants his defense to talk about or something like that, he is just jotting it down, handing it off to his defense attorney, but just for the most part sitting quietly at the defense table, but not even really looking at his family for affirmation or anything like that. He really is just very much so kind of being inside that courtroom at the defense table, focused on what the testimony is.
Very interesting. Well, Elizabeth, we are going to let you go. Court should be resuming fairly shortly, and we know you need to get back to it. Thanks so much. It's been great talking with you. We will let you get back to work. Elizabeth Millner, have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to get back to your questions with our panel. We have some great guests here. Melba Pearson is a former prosecutor based down in Florida, and Tyler Bailey is a criminal defense attorney in South Carolina. So guys, first of all, before we get to more of the questions from our viewers, and they're sending in some really good ones, Melba, just some thoughts on what Elizabeth had to say.
Again, just continuing with the heartbreaking nature of all of this, because, much like Elizabeth, I was a huge Diddy fan back in the day. This is a couple that we followed on socials. And again, you had that glamorous image and you really thought that this was, a great couple. And then, okay, they broke up, whatever. No clue the horrors that were going on behind closed doors, and everything that she endured is just, yeah, it's just gut wrenching. And it also kind of makes us kind of, I guess, as fans, feel guilty that, wait a minute, we were supporting this monster all along. I mean, I think folks kind of felt the same way in the wake of R. Kelly and all of those allegations coming out, and then his eventual criminal conviction. But I think it's just, again, it's a gut check in terms of worshiping celebrity, and sort of like who you follow and what the real story is, and the fact that they are human and subject to all the human frailties, both good, bad, and indifferent.
Yeah, I think this is a good reminder that no matter what you see, these pictures on social media, Tyler, whether you think Sean Combs is actually guilty of a federal crime, you never know what is going on behind closed doors. And obviously, it's very evident there was domestic violence here.
Yeah, and what I found really interesting about what Elizabeth just told us was the lack of emotion that she could see from the jurors. We know about Mr. Combs and these allegations, and they're hearing this horrendous testimony and live in that courtroom, in that solemn courtroom, by a competent AUSA who's prosecuting this case, and she said she did not see much emotion on the jurors. I don't want to read into that too much, but that could be that the jurors are really doing their job and taking in all evidence and not rushing to an early conclusion, that they could have been aware of what they were going to see and they weren't shocked by what they're seeing and hearing. But it's real early in the case, and we'll see what that means later on.
Yes, we will see. We will see. Let's get to more of your questions now. This one is from Corey Evans. Melba, do you believe this trial warrants the government spending millions of dollars solely to arrest him for participating in a few freak-offs? I think the government would say it's more than a few freak-offs.
Yeah. Um, I've heard a number of comments around that. And again, let's remember we all have sisters, mothers, aunts, women that we care about. And I think that it is critical that the government, whether it be on the state level or the federal level, takes these types of cases seriously. Because again, it's not just about a couple freak offs, it's about the fact that someone was brutalized and forced against their will to go different places and perform sex acts. That's not okay. So, yes, absolutely. I think that the government should be spending millions of dollars to let folks know that it doesn't matter how wealthy you are or how broke you are. If you are abusing people, you need to be held accountable. Period. End of story.
Our next question is from J Mac, Tyler. Diddy's lawyers in court documents has stated he has a tape on Cassie trying to extort Diddy for money. If she's caught doing that, what happens, or the tape proves exactly that? So this would be possible impeachment evidence.
Yeah, it'll hurt her credibility. Right now, you just heard Elizabeth say that she seems to be doing a good job giving her testimony, that she seems very believable. But during examination and possibly as impeachment evidence, if they pull out this video, I think it could show the jurors another side of her. And I think that's exactly what the defense is going to do. They have to show the jurors another side of Miss Ventura. As we said earlier, she's 8 months pregnant. She seems competent. She's a beautiful woman who went through horrendous things. And the defense has a job to defend Mr. Combs and hopefully, in their view, get him acquitted. And by doing that, they're going to have to pull out all punches with a velvet glove, with a hammer, or whatever they see fit. But they're going to bring this out.
I want to mention too, we've been asking our viewers some poll questions in the YouTube chat. So one of the poll questions we've asked is, do you believe Cassie Ventura's versions of events? 88% of the voters in the chat say yes. 12% so far are saying no, they don't believe it. So the lion's share of the voters believe Cassie. Our next question is from S. Lee. Melba, this one's for you. How does Cassie's testimony at trial affect her settlement agreement? And I'm assuming this is referring to the civil lawsuit. And of course, there was an NDA probably attached to that. So where they probably promised not to speak about this publicly and that type of thing. But oftentimes, NDAs, when it comes to testifying in court, that doesn't, that supersedes an NDA.
Yes, absolutely. So first off, whatever settlement agreement they had, one would assume the money's been paid or a down payment has been paid, whatever the case may be. So that is pretty much concluded. Now, in terms of the NDA and her being able to testify, again, a government subpoena is a government subpoena. If you disobey a government subpoena, you can be held in contempt of court. So the NDA does not hold water when it comes to being subpoenaed to speak in court about, a particular issue. However, how it would come into play is that the settlement may not necessarily be the feature or be discussed in the trial as a general premise. What's going to be discussed in the focus would be on all the underlying issues that were raised in the civil suit, so to speak.